Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is Enrich Your Career Through Leadership and Service, brought to us by the CNHP Faculty Affairs Committee. So now let me throw it over to Lisa Chiarello, the chair or the co-chair of the CNHP Faculty Affairs Committee. Lisa, take it away.
Thanks, Darren. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. So on behalf of the Faculty Affairs Committee, as well as the Faculty Professional Development Subcommittee, we just want to welcome you to our talk today on Enrich Your Career Through Leadership and Service. And I just want to start by first thank you for joining us, those that are in person now and those that might watch it later. We realize, and this is important that we wanted to kind of acknowledge, we realize that being in academia right now, it is challenging. We're coming off of the pandemic, which everyone had to put a lot of effort in order to make sure that we were meeting our goals and providing quality education and research and service. But one of the things that we really believe in, even though there's changes going on right now in CNHP, is supporting one another. So the opportunity for us to discuss, with the panel today, just how we can support each other in our profession and in our goals and our dreams and wishes. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Jennifer. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Lisa, and welcome everyone. So we have a distinguished panel of speakers today, and our first speaker will be Dr. Dana Kemery, who is an associate clinical professor in undergraduate nursing.
Thanks, Jennifer. Next slide, please. So I like to start lectures and talks out with start thoughts, right? Things that you may want to take with you. So this quote is from Jim Quick. I don't know if anyone knows Jim Quick. He's the author of Limitless, and he actually puts this quote on his LinkedIn profile. It just made me stop in my tracks, right? So if you stay limited with your barriers and you believe that's where you need to stay, you're going to get to keep that, right? You're going to get to live in whatever confines you put there for yourself. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So when I started here, right, as faculty at Drexel, I came from a really robust clinical background. I'd worked for over 20 years. I'm not going to tell you how many, over 20 years, as an ED nurse. And I knew what to do and how to do it and how to get things done, right? But as a novice academic, when I came here, I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't have a traditional educational journey. So I didn't go from high school to four-year college, that kind of thing. And I was a first-gen student. I didn't even know what the bursar's office was. So not only was I coming into this academic environment, kind of sort of understanding it a little bit because I had gone to Drexel for my master's in nursing education, but I had a lot of growing to do, right? I'm not saying this is or was comfortable, right? But you got to try new things. But what do we know? What do we learn if you can't try? So the next slide, which I see we forward to, is Carol Dweck's work. No, go back, please. Growth mindset. Okay, there you go. So it's Carol Dweck's work about a growth mindset, right? So I tried really hard to take on that growth mindset because, quite frankly, I came in with an entity mindset to most of my academic career. Because I was, I understood stuff in high school and everybody always told me I was smart, and it was fearful, right, for me to reach out and do things that maybe I wouldn't be successful at, right? And a lot of people who are overachievers and who want to grow get that feeling, like you've got that, feeling like if I fail, how am I going to look and what's going to happen and all that good stuff. So changing your thinking and changing my thinking specifically from an entity mindset to a growth mindset was key, right? We need to change the scripts that we tell ourselves about ourselves because we are much more than what we're telling ourselves in the moment. So when I get opportunities that I think might help me grow, I take them. Many of these are hard. Many of them I have no idea what I'm doing to step in, and it gets a little messy, but that's okay, right? Because the messiness is okay. Next slide, please. And I've learned from it. I've learned a lot from doing things that I was very uncomfortable with doing, like joining Faculty Senate, like being chair of a Faculty Senate committee. I still am trying to figure it out, but it will get there, and it's not always going to be perfect. So saying yes, no, or sometimes maybe is a skill that we need to develop. So over time, I've needed to develop the skill, and trust me, I am still doing it. This morning, I had 4 different opportunities that came into my email. All of them look very interesting, and all of them I would love to do, but I only have 24 hours in a day. And part of that day, I have to eat and I have to sleep. And I would like to talk to my husband sometimes. So when we make these choices effectively, it's another way to build our leadership for me individually and ultimately my career. But I'm still bad at saying no, because I still have these couple emails in my email box that I don't want to delete just yet, or send a response back like, I can't really do that this time because I'm still thinking about it. So how do these things that we either yes accept or no decline, how do they fit into our overall plan for our career and for my development when we look at that? So that's one thing that I still struggle with, but I'm getting better at. So at least I'm thinking more than once before I say yes to everything. Next, please. So I talked about making mistakes. So failing forward can be very frightening. Part of the gift of my doctoral education was the opportunity to read a lot of Maxwell's work. So he has a book called Failing Forward, right? And failing and failure seems like something we want to avoid at all costs, but Maxwell reframes it similar to how Dweck reframes it, in thinking that failure is the part of your pathway to being successful, to doing new things. So Maxwell breaks this down in Failing Forward by focusing on redefining failure, right? Changing that mindset, thereby changing your perspective, and ultimately allowing for more successful endeavors in the future. Next slide, please. And that's my last slide. I love a good visual, right? So part of what I do, and part of, I think, what keeps me grounded and thinking forward, right, about what I'm doing and where I'm going, is putting things up like these posters, these examples. So it reminds me that mistakes are part of my journey. So when I mess it up a little bit, I'm like, it's going to be okay, because that's part of my process. It's part of my growth. So I want to give you guys a quick tip before I pass things over to Denise, my very able colleague. If you're going to a conference, because we're all starting to go back, get some little stickers to take with you, just little tiny ones, right? Like this. Okay. They're full of opportunities, conferences, of sharing between academics and vendors and things like that. You always get business cards, right? So when you get a business card from someone who you really in the moment know you want to follow up with, you're not just taking it to be polite or things, put a sticker on it. And that way, when you go back to your room and you go back home, within minutes, you'll know what was most interesting to you. And that has helped me to kind of pare that whole big pile down when I was at different conferences to what was really meaningful and what helped. So try a sticker, take it, Denise.
Okay. Hey, next slide. Good morning. Oh, good afternoon.
Denise, do you want me to introduce you?
You can. I was going to jump right into it. You can.
Okay, I also wanted to say that if you have a question, we can take like one question after each speaker, but then we'll take a whole bunch of questions after the 4th speaker. Lisa, you had your hand up.
I did. Thanks, Jennifer. Jenna, I just wanted to really thank you for sharing about mistakes. I think that that's so important, and it's important though to share with our students that we make mistakes. They're always so like, oh my goodness, you did that, because I also think it prepares them for taking opportunities. And then just one thing that I love about that is also being kind to ourselves when we make mistakes and being kind to others. So just thank you for those posters. I love them.
Thank you, Lisa. If I don't see any hands, let's see. I don't see any hands up. So let us go to our next speaker, Dr. Denise Way, who is assistant professor and a clinical professor in undergraduate nursing. Denise?
Thank you so much. And I just want to piggyback on what Dana was saying, which was really interesting and good. And again, just making mistakes. So I'll share my experience. I had worked as a nurse for quite a few years, and then I was deciding what should I do. And actually, I saw a Drexel clinical instructor come to the hospital where I worked at. And so when I saw her, I really hadn't thought about being a teacher, an educator. I said, let me think about it. So the young lady that was there, we were teaching clinical students, and she said, Denise, hey, how about you be a clinical adjunct faculty? And I said, really? Me? And again, I didn't even think about it. So I tried it. So I applied and I got the job. So I actually got hired at Drexel, as I said before, working on the floor as a nurse in different areas, like med surg. I had some experience in ICU, but just rotating for the different opportunities that nursing provides. So anyway, I got the job as an adjunct faculty. And just to share some of my experience as adjunct faculty, I started out, I believe, in 2012, and I started in med surg, and I worked in the clinical areas at the different hospitals that they assign you to. And one of the things they look at is what's your expertise. And I had worked many years in med surg. So that was one of the first jobs that I had at Drexel, working in med surg clinical with students. And that was very rewarding. Again, they really look at what's your expertise, but it doesn't mean that you can't work in some of the other areas. Another area which was interested to me was community health as well. So this listed here is the different opportunities that you have for adjunct faculty. Now, after I worked as an adjunct faculty for a couple years with the clinical students, which I really enjoyed, I became a clinical coordinator, and that was very interesting. And just by working as a clinical adjunct, but also working in the skills lab, opportunity came for me to be a clinical coordinator. And I really loved that. And then as a clinical coordinator, you work in a skills lab, you take vital signs, maybe do trach care. You're learning the skills to be a professional nurse and working in the hospital, whatever area you want to specialize in. So they really prepare you for a lot of the different skills in the health field. So that was very rewarding, but also it led to me for a teaching opportunity while I was working as a clinical coordinator and seeing some of my other faculty members move on to academia as health professionals. So, and then, like I was saying, you had an opportunity, I would, teach in a classroom with some of the faculty that were already teachers, but they already had worked as a clinical adjunct as well. So it gives you a really good opportunity to really kind of plan, setting your goals to see where do you want to go next. And that was my goal, was to really teach in academia. So they gave me an opportunity to teach into academia. And it's just about really stepping out of your box. And sometimes we be afraid. And sometimes I think as we get, and nothing against our seasoned, beautiful, aging faculty, but sometimes as we get a little older, we get, situated and we seem to be stuck. But I would say age is just a number. Think out of the box, and you can move to the next slide. And the one thing I would say is just don't talk about it. Just do it. Just do it. How would you know? And even if you make a mistake, it's so many things you can learn in nursing. Just go back and say, okay, what else am I good at? What else can I do? And you will never know if you don't just do it. So that's my experience. So, Jennifer, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Do
You're
we
welcome.
have any questions yet? I don't see any hands up. All right, so our next speaker is Dr. Michael Bruneau, who.
Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
We
You
can
can?
hear you. Jennifer muted yourself.
Oh,
Oh,
gotcha.
yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Nasser. It's good to see you. And thank you, Denise and Dana, for doing very nice with your presentations as well. What I want to talk a little bit about today is sort of what I consider a blueprint for how to get engaged with professional development. So your professional organizations. And the reason why I talk about the blueprint, because it kind of gives you a map and a couple of different routes in which you can begin to engage. So next slide, please. So my story really began in 2005 when I was a very confused undergraduate student at Central Connecticut State University. I had changed my major 3 different times and began working in the fitness industry as a personal trainer at Bally Total Fitness. I realized very quickly that was not the direction that I wanted to go long-term. So about this time, my grandfather was having quadruple bypass surgery, changed the major to work for Harvard Healthcare as a cardiac rehabilitation therapist. That led me to UConn, where I did a master's, and then eventually Springfield for a PhD. But really the common thread through all of this was early on in my undergraduate experience, I had the ability to become involved with the New England regional chapter of the ACSM, which is in the exercise science and sports medicine profession is largely considered the flagship organization of professional service. Ultimately, as you'll see in the coming slides, really this was the common thread that really what I consider part of my identity as an academician here at Drexel. And I've been blessed and very fortunate to be able to serve as president for the Mid-Atlantic chapter this past year. So next slide, please. So as I said, it really didn't start out very smooth. When I first got into college, I wanted to be a psychology major, and that was largely based off of a vicarious experience I had with my high school professor, Dr. Alan Strauss. And so I went to college and they said, hey, if you want to teach psychology in high school, you better take history because that's a little bit too specialized. So then I started taking history, and I wasn't really super interested in teaching history. So at about that time, I was playing college football at CCSU, and really we were doing a lot of off-season workouts. And so I said, maybe I'll do physical education. So you could advance the slide and there's going to be a nice little emoji that's going to pop up. So I'm like, what's really going on here? So I was pretty confused and looking for direction. Actually came very close to dropping out of school and just taking over my father's construction business. Next slide, please. So at this point, I really had to take an honest look in the mirror, and I had to be real with myself and say, okay, let's stop focusing on what everybody else wants. What does Mike Bruneau want? And let's stop worrying about what other people think of me. And if I was to fulfill the next 24 hours and do something that is productive, that's going to advance my life, what would that be? So next slide, please. What I really realized that would be, you can advance it again, is at the time I was reading books like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. I was reviewing information about careers in the exercise science and sports medicine profession. What could you actually do with this profession? I said, well, maybe I should be an exercise scientist. So I said, let's change the major and go with that as the 4th career option. Next slide, please. So at about this time, I was conducting some seated exercise at St. Lucian's Retirement Center up in New Britain, Connecticut. And I was finally starting to feel like things were coming together. So at about this time, you could advance the slide. I had the opportunity at Harvard Healthcare to meet a gentleman by the name of Dino Costanzo, who is the executive director of New England ACSM. And so I knew that being in an environment where I was going to be close with somebody who had influence in that organization was really going to be helpful in advancing my career. So I had built relationships with Dino. Next slide, please. And at the conclusion of that internship, he says, well, hey, what are you doing? I want you to come to ACSM National. The conference is in Baltimore, Maryland this year. And he's like, you're probably a broke college student. So why don't you jump in the car and drive 5 hours from New Britain down to Baltimore to go to this conference? So I took advantage of that opportunity and went to my first ACSM annual meeting in Baltimore with Dino. When next slide, please. He introduced me to Linda Pescatello at the University of Connecticut, who was looking for master's students in exercise science and sports medicine. Next slide, please. So at about that time, I go to UConn and I'm trying to figure things out. I start meeting a lot of collaborators, a lot of colleagues who had different experiences. And I was very fond about my time at UConn. Next slide, please. So we really were kind of interested in, what about these recommendations? If exercise is so good for people, how come not many people do it? So we were really comparing the one size fits all approach to, next slide, please, whether or not we think that this is really a sweet science, right? Is there's this individualized way of prescribing exercise for people? And so Linda and I thought very deeply about that and published a 2015 systematic review meta-analysis on that topic. So at about that time, I'm done with UConn. Next slide, please. And I'm getting ready to go to ACSM National in Indianapolis when she's like, you got to meet this guy, Sam Headley. You can forward the slide. And so Sam Headley was at Springfield College looking for PhD students, who was also a member of the New England regional chapter. Next slide, please. So he sends me and I get a PhD opportunity to go to Springfield College. Next slide. So I go to Springfield and I pursue my PhD in exercise physiology with subspecialties in clinical exphys. I worked with Dr. Vince Pallone, who's a Philadelphia native, as well as Sam, who also did his PhD at Temple. So next slide, please. At about this time, I was also working at Hartford Healthcare and was working back with Dino as the processing coordinator for New England ACSM. So I had that professional development. So next slide, please. We continue to go through the PhD program. This is Sam and I at the ACSM National Meeting in San Diego, California. And he's starting to ask me, well, what are you going to do when you get your PhD, Mike? So next slide, please. I said, well, there's this really good opportunity back, ironically, in Philadelphia, where you folks are from. And so I came to Drexel in 2016. And that's where I've been ever since. So next slide, please. So really, to wrap all of this up and to kind of give you some tips of what I really feel are the core tenets of how I got to be a student who is very confused, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, very close to being on the brink of dropping out of school altogether, to eventually becoming a president for a regional chapter. And really it comes down to three different things. Next slide, please. And these are the three tenets themselves. The first one is you have to have self-awareness. Stop faking it. Stop worrying about what other people think about you. What do you want? It doesn't matter. You're the one that has to go do this career. And I realized that exercise science was the thing that I needed. And I had to be very clear on what I was good at and what my limitations were. Next slide, please. The second tenet is you need to seek out very good mentors, people who care about you enough to put you on a road to have an opportunity to channel that energy in a way that is going to serve you. So peer mentors is the second key tenet. And lastly, the third tenet I would say is those things mean nothing unless you actually roll up your sleeves and engage in the process. This is Pat McDowell from the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 days after they had lost the Super Bowl this year. And he came because he knew it was going to be important to me to have him there and talk to our strength and conditioning students about that. So really being true to yourself, being self-aware, knowing your limitations, finding good mentors who can put you on the right track to use the talents that you do have, address the limitations that you don't necessarily have right now, but you could get through and additional time and effort. And when you do those three things, I have found that has really been the hallmark for how I've become actively engaged in my professional organization and had opportunities to advance in the field. So without further ado, the last thing I'll just say is if you're interested in learning more about it, Dr. Nasser was just on our Exercises Medicine podcast. We talk about a lot of these types of things and much more long form discussions. You can take a picture of the QR code, listen to any of our talks there. But I would say one last thing, and that is a goal without a directive is just a dream. If you have a goal and you don't have a directive of how you're going to get there, it's just a dream, and you should not be surprised if you don't achieve it. Once you find the mentor that can show you the steps, put it in the appropriate order, I think you'll find that your efforts that you put forth in life will be very fruitful for you, and you'll be surprised just how much you can accomplish. So thanks very much, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Bruneau. Let's see, do we have any questions? Not yet. So we'll move to our last but not least speaker, Dr. Lisa Chiarello, who is professor in the Department of Rehabilitation Sciences and Physical Therapy.
Thanks, Jennifer. And as I'm sitting here, so just so you know why we plan to this session, we did not, other than to last night, did not share our slides across each other. And I'm just sitting here and like the themes that are coming through about, just my colleagues, here and myself, willingness to kind of be open and let you know that the road wasn't easy. We made mistakes and we keep moving forward. And just also the common themes of connections and mentorship and people and doing, having a plan and rolling up your sleeve and actually doing. So I want to thank you also for your openness. I'm going to start just telling a little bit about my journey in terms of getting involved in the Professional Association of the Academy of Pediatric Physical Therapy. And this really started when I was a PhD student. And I was young and I was really naive. And I went to my first, national, conference. I didn't even know that I was supposed to be attending some meetings that I should have been attending. So I would tell you a big mistake that we made was we went to Epcot. I'd never been to Disney World. We actually went to Epcot one night and missed an important meeting that we should have been at, but we didn't know. We were not acclimated to what this professional association was all about and what this big, large conference was. But I can remember feeling, I was on the shy side and like feeling about like, okay, well, how do I get in the door? And so we'd go to these different events at the meeting, and this is before, right? Before the internet, before kind of email, right? So they'd be passing around papers. Sign up if you want to help with this, if you want to get on this task force, if you want to get on this committee. Well, I signed my name on so many of them. I actually went to the booth, signed up to help at the booth, and never heard, right? Followed up, kept asking, made a call, still, and I'm thinking like, this is really hard to actually do service. I want to help, I want to do work. But so it did take kind of that persistence of not like, okay, well, they're not going to let new people, maybe I'm too young, maybe I don't have something to offer. So there's like kind of these experts in the field, and it was a little intimidating. But I did connections through friends and mentors was really important. So one of the faculty, so I got my PhD at Hahnemann, which was now Drexel, but one of the faculty mentors said, Lisa, I'd like you to join on this task force. And so my comfort level wasn't great. But I did the work, right? I rolled up the sleeve, I did the work. We put together a position paper, we put together, competencies. And it was through that kind of performance and others seeing, wow, she can contribute. She has some ideas. She produces some things that then I kind of started building my confidence. So kind of that circle of confidence and then more comfort and then keeping to being able to perform. There was many different avenues with so that I could have chosen because of my interprofessional nature, but I did really want to keep doing my service in the pediatric physical therapy world, because my transition to academia was reluctant. Right. I can remember when I got my PhD, I went back to practice, and Bob Palisano said, and Susan Afghan said, no, one day you're going to end up in academia. And I said, no, I will not end up in academia. I really, saw myself, my identity as a physical therapist and providing service. So when I did, ate my words, end up in academia, maintaining that connection to service delivery was really important to me. So the service opportunities I selected was very intentional. So I did not serve on the research committee, but I served on the early intervention special interest group, went from being on the task force to then chairing the early intervention special interest group, being a regional director, so that I was connecting to 10, I was responsible for 10 states and connecting members into 10 states and finding out, well, how do members need to be better served? Then moving on to being practice committee chair to make sure that the research that was being generated was being translated into useful products and information that practitioners could use. And then from there, with really believing in that mentorship and kind of passing on the torch, being chair of the nominating committee. Next slide. But balancing professional service in academia with research and teaching can be challenging. Right? So I really had to make sure that there was overlap, that there was interconnections, that there was links. So I really found as a research that I could not give up the service because that reciprocal enrichment. So service really helping to generate the research questions and really helping to make sure that through my service, I was also providing opportunities for practitioners to be involved in research. And then in research, once we generate that knowledge, make sure that through service, it went back to impacting practice. And so similarly, also that service enhancing teaching, providing a role model or an opportunity for students so they can actually see professionalism in action, and that we're actually providing students that I didn't forget my opportunity of getting in the door of Susan Efkin putting me on a task force. So making sure that I provide opportunities for students and talk to students about the professional association and providing them opportunities to get involved while they're students. Though it did become more challenging because I love professional service at the organizational level, that also how was I going to balance that with professional service to the university? So I did have to reduce the amount of professional service I was doing in order to make sure that those themes and connections across service that were important to me, collaboration and citizenship, that I was able to then do those at the university level. And that kind of gets into this point of passing on the torch. So it was important to me that even though I loved being involved at the association, making sure that I was providing the opportunities for others, the next generation, to take leadership, roles. Next slide. So this is a picture at a recent conference that I was at this fall, where I still am connected with and supporting. So this is showing kind of the four of us who've all been chair of the Early Intervention Special Interest Group. So in the current chair is facing the picture to my right. So just that people, that connection, that supporting others was really important. But just the benefits that I gained from professional service, it does take an effort. You do need to kind of roll up your sleeve and give your time. But really learning the regional differences across the country and across internationally has been phenomenal. Meeting people with varied backgrounds has just enriched my perspective and my understanding. And just, kind of the bottom line that the sum is greater than the parts. Established lifelong friends. And it has been these friends who actually have been there for me in tough times. So not just colleagues, but as I said, meaningful friendships, the opportunity to mentor and support others, and that knowing that you're making a meaningful impact on the profession and practice. And I just kind of looking at the time, one of the last things that I want to kind of bring around circle about the idea of making mistakes. So as I provided opportunity for others to be leaders in professional service and kind of have moved into wanting to stay, to still be doing service into my regional community. I want to let you know that there's challenges there and have made mistakes where the match maybe with the organization, locally that I selected to try to do service to, didn't work out. So even though I've made mistakes recently in finding the right fit, a couple of things that I've learned and continue to learn in the process is to trust my instincts, right? So I think Michael said, like, don't worry about what others are thinking all the time. Well, I had several people kind of like, pushing me to get involved in this one organization. And I kind of felt like, something doesn't seem right. I really was concerned. But all these people are kind of pushing me in that direction. But I really learned that I actually need to trust my instincts. And even though I made mistakes in some of those connections, every opportunity I've learned from, and there was actually moments of joy. I'm going to stop there, and we really welcome you to share your experiences. So even if if you don't have questions, this is an opportunity to kind of share your experiences and your insights to support each other's professional development.
So I'm going to take the prerogative of the session moderator and ask the first question. And when we talk about mistakes, what I want to do is flip that question and talk about the conflict, I think, between being offered what would have been considered a very highly prestigious academic position, but knowing that it would have been a mistake. And I was in that situation once. And I just wonder if, all of the panelists can think about times when they've said no to situations where our profession, our colleagues or ever are saying, oh, this is a great opportunity, but inside, not for you. And the audience, if they've, have had those experiences, feel free to jump in. I don't see anyone raising their. Dana, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you put yourself out there enough, you're gonna have those experiences. So from a professional perspective, I'm very active in the Emergency Nurses Association and my own local ENA in New Jersey. So there have been opportunities to chair our annual conference, right, which is in March every year, and it takes a lot of planning to do that. And I've turned those down, but you're so good at it, and you're always at the conference, and that's all well and good. I do support the conference, and as I do, work with the ENA and things like that. But at this point right now in my career, I don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that and do that well. And I think that's part of what I think about. If I take this opportunity, which will be amazing, am I going to have the bandwidth to pull it off and to make some meaningful, contribution?
Lisa.
Yes, so Jennifer had a similar opportunity where I was given several times over my tenure here at Drexel, the opportunity to take on more higher administrative position and responsibilities, and why I like administration. And I also knew for a couple of the positions that in order to do that position well, and Dana, I struggled, your point about like taking opportunities that you're going to learn, right? And I knew that I would have a lot of learning to do, right? So it was going to be like a lot of learning. And I did question myself a little bit, could I handle it? But like, if I thought deep down, I know that I could do the work and I could learn, and I had a skill set that would enable me, to provide some meaningful contribution in that. But I was going to have to give up considerable, a lot of the research. I knew that I could not do the research, teaching and that level of administration. So that was a kind of a hard decision. I turned it down so that I could, kind of continue with balancing the research and the teaching of my professional service.
Let's see. I don't want to leave anyone out here. Yeah, for me, I had been working for a short time in a a metabolic unit with infants less than a year old with genetic disorders. And there was the chief of the unit thought I was doing a great job, and a faculty slot came up, and it was at a real major medical center with tons of funding and all that. But there was this one case that was so horrific. I thought this poor 5-month-old that had come to this country from another underdeveloped country, and so many overlapping genetic problems, and they were on all sorts of support systems, as you know, and the family couldn't accept culturally and religiously that the infant would need multiple organ transplants. And I found myself one night, I was so upset after meeting with the family that I went home. And if you're from New York, you'll know this reference. I ate a whole Entenmann's chocolate cake, a whole 8x10 tray of chocolate cake for my dinner. And then I said, you know, Jennifer, this is not going to be a healthy situation for you. So when I went to work the next day, you know, I said to the chief, I would love to have this faculty appointment, but I told him what happened and he laughed. And I said, I can't do it. He goes, no, this isn't healthy for you. This is not the right job. And I think that was a turning point also career-wise, because, you know, there's a point where you're the quote unquote young academic or investigator, and you want to get all this experience and you want the opportunity. But at some point you have to say, this is right for me or this is not right for me. Denise, go ahead.
Oh, I hope I didn't cut you off, but that was interesting. But going back to the question that you had asked, you know, had you experience with far as making a mistake or a position that you thought you wasn't good in. I just remember when I was as working as adjunct faculty, and I was pursuing academia, being a professional, and I was going for my DNP program. And, you know, unfortunately, I don't know, when you mentioned it, that some people, they were happy, but I'm thinking again what Michael was saying as well, you know, the mentor, having a mentor is real important, but also just following your mind, doing what you want and don't worry about what other people say. You know, questions was being asked, oh, well, why you want to get your doctorates in nurse practitioner? And I'm more clinically based, but it wasn't a good feeling, you know, in talking with people. And I just decided myself, I said, that's what I want to do. That's my goal. I'm going to do it. So I pursued it. And so just going back on, you know, what Michael was saying, those three things is something you want to do sometimes. And what you were saying, Lisa, your intuition, you have to follow your goals. Everybody might not be happy, but it's for you. And if it's something you pursue and you persevere, you can do it. And again, just thinking about where do you want to be at? Where do you see yourself at? So it takes a lot. And even if, and for me, it wasn't a mistake. It was something I was really dedicated to do, and also wanted to pursue it. So I think all the points is just really good references and good points. But again, the thing is the mentorship and being true to yourself, and then following your goal, and don't worry about what other people say.
I have just, I guess, just to round out the panel on this issue. So a couple things that come to mind about the question I think are important for people to consider in the realm of professional service. Number one, there's absolutely been times, subcommittees, things that I've been on in professional development that I realize in hindsight that was probably something that was underdeveloped, or the initiative that I was tasked with being part of, they weren't where I had thought coming into it that they were at. And the role that I had in I'm not going to name the specific organization, but it was not an ACSM organization, but one of the specific roles that I was put on as someone that was, you know, a junior faculty member with a lot of energy was to deal with some of the marketing and communication efforts for that organization, which a lot of professional organizations, if they don't have those type of people, they rely on other folks to do some of that work, social media posting, things of that nature. And quickly what happened in that situation was a role of being someone that was designed to come up with a marketing strategy quickly morphed into developing promotional materials for conferences, to traveling around the country on weekend trips to go to these conferences and sit at booths, to even handling social media platforms. And so like the role, which going into it I thought was X, ended up being something where they wanted 5X effort for that. And ultimately, you know, I left on good terms. I finished my term out, but I chose not to. I was offered to continue to serve and become a president for that organization. And I just kind of realized that developmentally they weren't where I thought they were in a position to provide support for me to be a president. And so in that way, you're putting yourself out there as a president, right? The face of the whole organization or the chapter, and you don't have the resources to enact it in a way where you could be successful. And so it's important to be able to say, maybe 5 years from now when some of this stuff is developed, but if I take this on now, it might be lackluster compared to the expectations you have for yourself. And that's a reflection on you, that you took on something and it's built in that the quality can't be as good as you want it to be. So understanding and getting really clear, I think, on what the role that you're having in professional service, I think is really, really important. Because sometimes, like, unless people are very clear on what they want you to do, it could quickly morph into becoming a beast that becomes 3 or 4 roles that are labeled as one position. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, and I know Lisa was saying before that some people probably need to get to other meetings, so need a transition time. So before we close it out, does anybody have any other comments, words of wisdom, ideas, quips, anything that they might like to share with the whole group?
Just one last one, if I may, Jennifer, is sometimes if opportunity doesn't come knocking, like you try to apply for places, just build the door. Like, just say, hey, listen, I noticed that you know, go introduce yourself at a conference. Says, hey, I noticed that you guys have this gap. I really love the I have an idea of how you might want to pursue this. I'd really love to be involved. And then, like, if they don't have anybody to do it, sometimes that's your angle, in your foot in the door, so to speak. And then once you start developing relationships with people and they see the great work you can do, that'll oftentimes snowball into other opportunities. So if the opportunity is not coming, like, hey, we're looking for people, don't do that. I would say that's the wrong way to approach professional development sometimes, because you're putting the responsibility in the hope that someone else is going to give you that opportunity, rather than taking control and responsibility for it yourself and making it happen in some way, shape, or form. It might not be an official position on a board per se, but it's, hey, this person came in and they handled this aspect of the conference for us and they do a really good job. Let's get that person into a member at large role. And then once you're a member at large role, the path to presidency, past presidency, et cetera, those type of things tend to take care of themselves just by proxy of the process. So my 2 cents is if it's not necessarily something that you're having a hard time penetrating, getting into these organizations, sometimes finding a critique and then offering to help fix the critique is your foot in the door in that way.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Dr. Bruneau. Dr. Chiarello, any final words?
Isn't it just kind of, you know, circle back when, you know, Michael, you had shared about, you know, joining or working in an organ or for a role in an organization, and it wasn't what you expected, and you kind of, you know, finished that out, but then selected not to kind of move forward with with that. And I can just share an experience also where, I took on a role, and the group of people that I worked with, just, we didn't have any similar interests at all. There wasn't a connection as people. There wasn't a kindness there, and it was a very different situation than I'm used to. I've worked in groups where lots of differences, lots of varied backgrounds, but there was some connection as people. Whether it's just kind of that kindness of checking in how everyone's doing. So I think that life is short, and it's okay to also make some of your choices of which directions you go in, of which committees, which task force, which roles or which organizations or groups that you provide service to. Based on it is a group that you feel connected to.
And Dr. Kemery, any last words?
I think if it doesn't fit into your plan, right, for your career, you will question it. But the issue with that is you need to have a plan. So you need to know where you're going, right? Without that, it's like trying to travel across country without a roadmap or a GPS right now, right? Nobody uses maps anymore, right? But if you don't know, again, if you don't know where you're going, you don't know how to get there. And once you do have that plan solidified in your head, be ready to make adjustments, because there may be something that originally you didn't think was going to be an opportunity that would see you toward what you want. That may be the chance for you to stop and really think about it if you're continuing to consider it, or if that opportunity comes up again and again, there's a reason why that came up, right? And with Lisa, when you said, changing to an administrative role, you didn't really want to do that because you had a different focus, right? And even though you didn't question being able to do it or not, that may be, if that message keeps coming to you again and again, that may be the opportunity you need to take. And maybe that's the direction that you need to go. So always be ready to change your direction.
Thank you.
I love that. Dan, I think that's really important. I know there's a time that I, did not fit with my plan. It actually did not fit with my my agenda, my kind of umbrella of the work I was doing. But I really, something about the opportunity said, this is going to be important because it's going to put a pediatric person at the table. And it's also going to put a person from Drexel at the table to bring our name to this very prestigious thing. I think I can do it. I'm going to give it a try. And while I wasn't comfortable, I did it. And that actually did move the recognition of pediatrics into a really kind of a big ongoing thing related to fitness.
Thank you. Dr. Way, any last thoughts?
No, well, just to piggyback on the plan, I'm thinking, yes, you have to have a plan. And while I was thinking about the plan, I was thinking, okay, the same way, like say, for instance, if you have a goal of buying a new car, look at your budget, your credit. So those steps, you do need a plan moving forward. So I think the biggest thing is knowing where you're headed, but also have a plan of where you want to get to. So that's my thoughts.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. We'll give you back 5 minutes of your life, as the saying goes these days. And Darren, do you have any last announcements or anything?
No real announcements. Just I just put into the chat the Tuesday topics link on the website. So if any of those are of interest to you, please join us. Thank you, Dr. Way, Dr. Kemery, Dr. Nasser, Dr. Chiarello, and Dr. Bruneau for your insightful discussion. And thank you all so much. And after this is edited, it'll be up on our college YouTube site. So please check us out there. Thanks.
And Darren, if I could just add, and anyone, please feel free to follow up with any of us we really are here. We really do like to guide the professional development and service of others. So if we can actually open a door for you or a window, or help you kind of jump over any obstacle, please don't hesitate to reach out.